Have you ever asked yourself who you really are? If every mask you wear were stripped away, who would remain? And what if the you think you know is just a reflection of what others expect from you? Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." But are we truly ready for that awakening? From the moment we're born, we're bombarded with expectations. Family, culture, society, all shaping us, telling us who we should be. We grow up believing we're a fixed identity. Yet deep down, there's an unsettling feeling. We don't fully know ourselves. Sometimes we even feel like strangers to our own being. Psychology shows us that we aren't just one single self. We're a collection of multiple selves, coexisting, often clashing. There are parts of our personality we hide, repress, or deny. But eventually, those parts break through, often at the most unexpected moments. Have you ever done or said something and later wondered, why did I do that? As if someone else inside you had taken control, even for just a moment. That happens because within us live forces we don't fully understand. Archetypes, shadows, unconscious patterns we've inherited and built up over a lifetime. In this exploration, we'll dive into Jung's psychology of self-knowledge. We'll ask, why is it so hard to truly know ourselves? How is our psyche organized? And, most importantly, how can we transform that knowledge into something practical and powerful in everyday life? But let me give you a warning before we begin. Knowing yourself is not comfortable. You may discover truths you'd rather ignore. Yet, if you have the courage to keep going, the reward is the freedom to become who you really are. So let's begin. If there's one journey that's truly challenging, it's the journey inward. Knowing yourself sounds simple. After all, who could know us better than we do? But the truth is, this search is full of traps. From a young age, we learn to see ourselves through the eyes of others. Our identity is molded by culture, family, and social expectations. We grow up being told who we should be, how we should behave, and even what we should want. In the middle of this storm of outside influences, where exactly does our true self begin? Carl Jung warned us about something he called the persona, the mask we wear to adapt to the world. The persona isn't necessarily a lie, but it's an edited version of ourselves. A social identity crafted to meet the demands of our surroundings. The problem is that, over time, we often confuse the mask for who we are. We spend so much of our lives playing a role that we start to believe the role itself is our essence. And then, when life forces us to face contradictions, when failure, crisis, or sudden change shake our foundations, the mask begins to crack. What lies behind it can be frightening. Beyond the persona, there's another major obstacle to self-knowledge: the shadow. The shadow is everything we repress, everything we don't want to acknowledge about ourselves. It's the impulses, desires, and emotions we consider inappropriate or unacceptable. Jung said the more we deny the shadow, the more power it gains over us. It comes out at the worst times, an outburst of anger, self-destructive behavior, or recurring patterns we can't seem to break. Often, what we criticize most harshly in others is exactly what we're refusing to face in ourselves. Have you noticed how some people's behavior irritates you almost irrationally? That can be a sign you're projecting your own shadow onto them. Another challenge in this journey is fear. Knowing yourself requires courage because it forces us to give up comfortable illusions. Many people prefer to live inside convenient stories rather than face the raw truth of who they are. It's easier to believe we're victims of fate than to admit we sabotage our own choices. It's safer to say that's just the way things are than to ask why we feel lost or unsatisfied. The mind builds defenses against this confrontation. We invent excuses, rationalize our behaviors, and convince ourselves we already know enough about who we are. But do we really? Another reason self-knowledge is so difficult lies in the sheer complexity of the human psyche. We're not a single, unified being. We're a mosaic of conflicting parts that don't always agree with one another. One moment we crave safety, the next we long for adventure. We want to be accepted, but at the same time we want to be authentic. This inner contradiction is inevitable, and trying to ignore it only takes us further away from who we really are. The problem is that society pushes us to choose just one identity, as if we're supposed to stick to a single path for life. But the truth is, we're always changing, always becoming something new. Socrates famously said, "Know thyself." But what he didn't mention is that self-knowledge is never static. There is no final answer, no ultimate definition of who we are. Self-discovery is not a destination. It's an ongoing process. Every experience, every mistake, every new perspective reveals a little more of us to ourselves. And here's the paradox. The more we come to know ourselves, the more we realize how much remains hidden. The real challenge of self-discovery isn't about finding answers, it's about daring to ask the right questions. Are we truly willing to look inward, even if what we find isn't pretty? Are we ready to challenge the stories we've been telling ourselves? To know yourself is an act of courage. It's a leap into the unknown, and maybe that's what makes the journey so fascinating. If self-knowledge is a labyrinth, Jung offered us a map, his model of psychological types. This framework not only explains how we think, feel, and perceive the world, but also why we so often feel disconnected from ourselves. He discovered that human consciousness operates through 4 main functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. On top of that, each person has a dominant attitude, either extroverted or introverted. This combination shapes our personality in profound ways, influencing how we interact with the world. People whose dominant function is thinking tend to analyze reality in a logical, structured, and objective way. They prioritize coherence and rationality, often valuing truth over emotion. By contrast, those led by feeling evaluate the world based on personal values and emotional impact. For them, what's right or wrong is tied more to harmony and human relationships than to cold logic. Neither perspective is better or worse. But depending on how we were raised and the environment we live in, we may repress one in favor of the other. How many times have you heard, "Don't be so rational," or the opposite, "Stop being so emotional"? The sensation function is rooted in the here and now. It focuses on concrete experience and physical details. A person with strong sensation is practical, realistic, and grounded in what can be verified with the senses. Meanwhile, intuition leans toward the unseen. It perceives patterns, possibilities, and hidden connections. Intuitive people look beyond the obvious, anticipating trends and sensing what's coming before there's any hard evidence. And here's where Jung's model gets even more interesting. Alongside these 4 functions, each of us also develops a predominant attitude. Extroverts direct their energy outward, seeking stimulation, interaction, and recognition from the external world. Introverts focus inward, on ideas, reflections, and feelings. This explains why some people recharge their energy at parties and social events, while others feel drained by too much interaction and need solitude to recover. The key to self-knowledge is identifying which of these functions dominates your psyche, and which ones you've neglected. Jung believed that our weakest function remains buried in the unconscious, silently influencing us. For example, someone who is extremely rational may ignore their emotions until those emotions burst out uncontrollably. An intuitive person might neglect the practical side of life, getting lost in ideas without ever putting them into action. What's fascinating is that as we grow and mature, we're called to integrate our weaker functions. But balance doesn't happen automatically. It requires effort, confrontation, and often crisis. People stuck in a single dominant function can become rigid and predictable. The overthinker risks becoming cold and insensitive. The overly emotional person may drown in feelings without direction. The sensation-focused individual might get trapped in the present, unable to see the bigger picture, and the pure intuitive may lose touch with reality altogether. Jung also introduced another crucial concept, the inferior function, the one we repress the most, which paradoxically holds the secret to our wholeness. The inferior function often shows itself in moments of stress, revealing a side of us we'd rather deny. A highly rational person might suddenly be overwhelmed by irrational, emotional outbursts. Someone guided by feelings might explode with surprising coldness and detachment. These reactions aren't failures. They're signals that our psyche is searching for balance. The inferior function isn't a flaw to eliminate, but rather a doorway to growth. And this is where the real challenge begins, accepting that hidden part of ourselves. Self-knowledge isn't about reinforcing what we already know about who we are. It's about opening ourselves to what we've ignored, denied, or feared. When we understand our psychological types, we gain a new perspective on our behaviors and struggles. We start to see our choices with more clarity. As most importantly, we learn to respect the unique way each person experiences the world. Jung never intended his model to box people into labels. He saw psychological types as dynamic forces that shift and evolve throughout life. When we stop resisting parts of ourselves and begin to integrate them, the result isn't limitation, it's freedom. And that's where true transformation begins. If Jung taught us anything, it's that no one is born complete. We spend our lives striving for wholeness, piecing together the parts of ourselves we've ignored, repressed, or projected onto others. This lifelong process is what Jung called individuation. It's not some lofty philosophical luxury. It's a deep psychological need. It's the line between an authentic life and one lived on autopilot. But the path isn't easy. It forces us to confront not only the image we've built of ourselves, but also everything we've rejected inside. From childhood, we learn to behave according to the expectations of those around us. To be accepted, we craft a social identity, our persona. If we grew up in an environment that valued intelligence, we worked to appear smart. If strength was prized, we hid our vulnerability. If pleasing others was key, we became masters of adaptation. The problem is, the persona is only a mask. It can be useful, even necessary, but it never represents the full truth of who we are. The more we confuse ourselves with that edited version, the further we drift from our real nature. And on the other side of the persona lies what we try hardest to hide, our shadow. The shadow is made up of everything we learn to reject, not because it's inherently bad, but because it didn't fit the rules of our surroundings. The shadow can contain suppressed anger, forbidden desires, unexplored talents, even positive qualities we were taught to undervalue. But the shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. If we don't face it, it resurfaces indirectly, making us act in ways we don't fully understand. That cutting remark we blurt out that hurts someone. That sudden, self-destructive urge that comes from nowhere. Often, it's the shadow pushing its way to the surface. The journey of individuation begins when we stop running from our shadow and start integrating it. This doesn't mean surrendering to our impulses, but recognizing that they exist and asking why they're there. Jung insisted that the goal of life isn't perfection, it's wholeness. And to be whole, we must accept even the parts of ourselves we dislike. That's why this path is so difficult. It forces us to confront head-on what we've spent years avoiding. Beyond the persona and the shadow, Jung identified other powerful forces that shape the psyche. Among them, the archetypes of the animus and the anima. The animus represents the masculine principle within women. The anima represents the feminine principle within men. This isn't about gender, but about opposing energies present in every human being. The animus may appear as an inner voice demanding logic and control, while the anima shows up as a current of emotions and intuition. Our relationship with these inner forces often influences our choices, especially in relationships. When we project our animus or anima onto someone else, we expect them to fill an inner void. But no one can complete us. That sense of wholeness can only be found within. At the center of Jung's model lies the archetype of the self, the deepest layer of identity that holds both light and shadow. Unlike the persona, which is built for the external world, the self represents who we truly are. And here's the paradox. Though the self is our most authentic state, many of us go through life without ever reaching it. The path of individuation is essentially a call to reconnect with the self, but it's rarely a straight path. More often, it shows up as a crisis. Losing a job, the end of a relationship, an existential doubt. These painful turning points are often signs that something inside us needs to be redefined. And when we resist, the suffering only intensifies. As Jung put it, what you resist persists. The only way out is through confrontation. This path is anything but comfortable, but the rewards are profound. The more we truly know ourselves, the freer we become. We stop living only to please others. We stop chasing external validation. We stop repeating destructive patterns we don't even understand. Individuation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who we've always been, before the world molded us into something else. And maybe the most liberating discovery is realizing that the answers have always been inside us. The real obstacle has never been a lack of knowledge. It's been our resistance to seeing what's already there. Self-knowledge, then, isn't an endpoint. It's a starting point. And it's not just about intellectual curiosity. It has real consequences for how we make decisions, face challenges, and build relationships. But here's the catch. Many people believe that once they understand their patterns and motivations, change will come automatically. It doesn't. Awareness alone changes nothing. Real transformation requires action. The first barrier to change is resistance. The ego hates change. Even when we're stuck in destructive cycles, part of us clings to the familiar. Our limitations, as painful as they are, often feel safer than the uncertainty of the new. Think about how many times we've said, "I want to change," while secretly repeating the same habits. That's because transformation always comes with a price. For many, staying the same feels cheaper than paying the cost of change. Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, it's not enough to chase an idealized version of ourselves. We must face the parts of us that sabotage our own growth. If you find yourself trapped in the same problems again and again, ask, what part of me benefits from this? It may sound absurd, but often our suffering hides a hidden payoff. Playing the victim can keep us from taking responsibility. Fear of rejection can justify staying passive. Perfectionism can protect us from risking failure. These dynamics remain invisible until we shine light on them. But once we see them clearly, they lose their power over us. Still, awareness alone is not enough. The next step is practice. True self-knowledge is lived, not just thought about. If you really want to know who you are, watch how you act when no one is looking. Your spontaneous reactions, your unconscious impulses, the moments that make you uncomfortable. All of these reveal truths your rational mind can't capture. When someone irritates you, ask yourself, is this person reflecting something I haven't accepted in myself? When anxiety rises, try to identify whether it's a real signal or just an echo of old beliefs that no longer serve you. And it's crucial to let go of the illusion that there's a final version of ourselves. Many people chase self-knowledge as if it were a destination, a moment when suddenly everything will make sense and life will have no more problems. But the truth is, we are always transforming. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago, and in 5 years, you'll be someone new again. That means self-discovery isn't about reaching a definitive answer. It's about committing to a lifelong process. The more we embrace this, the less trapped we feel in the need for absolute certainty. Another danger is getting stuck in the mind alone. Some people get so absorbed in analyzing themselves, reading, studying, dissecting emotions, that they drift away from real experience. But the real test of self-knowledge is daily life. How we face challenges, how we treat others, and how authentic we remain under pressure. And there's one last point. No journey of self-discovery is complete without action in the real world. What good is it to understand your fears if you still keep hiding? What's the point of recognizing your patterns if you never challenge them? Transformation demands risk. At some point, you have to step out of the world of ideas and act. That might mean setting a boundary, letting go of an identity that no longer fits, or opening yourself to something completely new. Whatever the case, real change happens the moment you decide to live differently. Self-knowledge doesn't guarantee a painless life. But it does give us something far more valuable, the ability to choose consciously who we want to be. And in the end, that's the only freedom that truly matters. The journey of self-discovery has no finish line. It isn't a straight road with a clear destination. It's a continuous cycle of discoveries, challenges, and transformations. We've explored why it's so difficult to truly know ourselves. The masks we wear, the shadow we repress, the archetypes that shape us. And we've seen how this knowledge can help us live with greater authenticity. But in the end, it all comes down to one question. Are you willing to look inward? Many people spend their whole lives running from themselves. They avoid silence, bury themselves in routines, hide behind relationships, work, or constant entertainment. They'll do anything to avoid facing their own shadow. Because deep down, they know that real change always comes with discomfort. Self-knowledge doesn't guarantee happiness. But it gives us something even more powerful, the freedom to be who we really are. Jung once said, "Being normal is the ultimate goal of the mediocre." Why? Because being normal means conforming to an outside model. Being whole, on the other hand, means accepting yourself completely. Strengths, flaws, contradictions, and everything that makes you unique. The world pressures us to conform, to act as if we already have all the answers, to hide our doubts. But the truth is, nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all figuring it out as we go. The greatest act of courage is not pretending to be strong. It's admitting that we're works in progress. If you've made it this far, it means this search is already part of your life. And that, in itself, is a huge step. Many never even begin. So now the question is, what will you do with this? Because knowledge alone isn't enough. Transformation begins the moment you choose to live differently. And remember, self-discovery isn't about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering the person you've always been.